But how do you balance, doing what's best for the business and looking after the employee?
The evolving or the dynamic environment that we work in, right? The space that we are into, not just the industry or the profile that we play, but I think as humans, we need to ensure that we stay relevant at any given point in time. The typical question, how do I ensure one to get the right talent in the organization? How do I ensure that they continue showing that stickiness in the organization? It's a very simple three word understanding for anybody to know. Any individual in the ecosystem that we are working today. What have we learned in this process through COVID and now?
Hi everyone, today we are joined by Hanish Dewan, CHRO at Unified Vision Capital. With nearly 20 years of experience, Hanish has led strategic HR initiatives, shaped organizational culture, and developed talent across a wide range of industries. He is a strong advocate of an employee-first culture and has managed transformative L&D programs that align with business growth. Hanish has also held leadership roles at Times Network, KPMG, Wipro, managing key HR functions. Hi Hanish, welcome to the show. So thank you Hanish for joining us. Let's start with the first question. How did your journey start and how did you evolve over the years?
Well, interesting. I think I've been answering these questions for a while now. Whenever I interact with most of these industry veterans, typically if you ask in HR, why did you end up joining in HR, and the typical answer that you end up getting is that was the only option available. Okay, so I think we'll have to break that silo where people really operate from and understand that your curiosity actually began, when you started thinking how people and business can get together and create that impact, using culture, leadership systems, how they influence results. That's what becomes critical for one to choose the field that they are into. So, I mean, past two decades of my career, that's what has built curiosity in me. Uh, how things have evolved, I think, every individual starts with a particular specialization in their career. And as you go along, you tend to become a specialist that helps you garner your skills over a period of time. So from just being a mere HR or a recruiter, you evolve into a strategic partner, interacting with industry leaders, CEOs, decision makers, helping them grow businesses, becoming a critical part of the entire ecosystem. That's what happens, when you transition from an individual who's starting their career to evolving into a strategic HR for any organization. So that's how my journey has panned out over a 2 decade time that I've spent in this industry.
So what are the biggest challenges for a CHRO today and how do you handle it?
It's actually very interesting to see this. And I mean, I will not quote names, but there have been often these news that have been flashed across bulletins. How these tough decisions have been taken in times where businesses see that little changes that come across, right? Uh, I think what is very critical and the biggest challenge that HRs really face is to balance business priorities and employee well-being, right? Uh, for any business, for any growing business, for that matter, uh, the priority is always looking at how we can expand our revenue, our bottom line, our employee, our people base, our consumers, and so on and so forth. But I think in that process, we end up looking at the most important aspect for that organization is people, right? Their well-being, and that creates a lot of disruption. Today, most of these organizations, if you look at it, where people make them as employer of choice, is because of their well-being and morale and trust, and not because high compensation, good growth opportunities, and so on and so forth. So I think that amalgamation of balancing business priorities and employee well-being plays a very, very critical role and is a challenging task for any HR in today's day and age. So building that for them becomes very crucial.
So Hanish, would you like to tell us about that? What all areas majorly you have worked with during all these years? You have so much experience with multiple companies. So any of the areas you would like to mention?
Yeah, certainly. I think like I mentioned a while back, employee well-being, which is actually the need of the hour, that becomes critical. But having said that, my experience has panned out over the last 2 decades across all spectrums of HR, right? Now, if you ask me to look at it into two different aspects. One, thinking as a business owner, as a P&L owner of an organization. For me, what becomes critical is sitting across the table to a CEO and making sense of how the business growth trajectory can be looked at from a people agenda perspective, right? How I can own that P&L for them to look at how cost effective can I make the organization, how I can build an efficiency. That's a role that I'm playing as a CHRO in my career. But if I look at the other side of the spectrum, when I look at the people agenda that I need to drive as my core expertise, uh, that's the area that one needs to really think deeper into. What really drives people? A sense of purpose, sense of belonging, a sense of trust, a sense of well-being in the organization that drives people. These are the levers that one need to really dwell deeper into to understand how you can create an organization which is an employer of choice. Uh, a good word to use, on the posters on the wall. But I think what we miss is how those can get inculcated in the DNA of the organization. So these are two critical areas which HR should really, really dwell deeper and understand how they can contribute on both sides of the spectrum than just being straight jacketed towards making it transactional. Yeah.
Very interesting. What works best to build an inclusive and high performing culture in the big companies? Because I see that, you have a lot of big companies in your portfolio.
Mm. So, this is a very commonly used term, inclusion, and adding to the prefix of that is diversity and inclusion, right? Uh, a big proponent of that. Why? Because in today's scenario, I think being an equal employer adds not only just to the brand image of the organization, but also adds to a lot of cohesiveness in the environment, right? Uh, it is important to have that inclusive culture. And how does it really inculcate in an organization? That is more critical to look at it. It's the leaders who drive that, right? What happens in the entire ecosystem today? And I'll take a classic example for that matter. Today, you're trying to drive your own business, right? And you try and say, hey, you know what? My single point agenda is I need to create a brand out of the entity that I've created. In that process, I end up just focusing uh, on business growth. I end up focusing on consumer base and so on and so forth. But what happens in that process is I tend to miss out on interacting to the last mile, how they feel included in the entire process, right? Uh, Most of my times that I've spent in, with again, without naming, quoting examples of or names of the organization, uh, the critical role that I have played in the early days of my career was bridging that gap between the leaders and the last mile. What happens in that process? One, you make them feel inclusive, which is the word that you're talking about. You make them feel belonged in the organization, and second, you also understand what is that factor that can really drive them in that process that they're looking at. uh, Otherwise, what you're trying to do is you're running the business in a silo. You're trying to grow that business in a silo without taking the team along with you. So you will see a lot of people join the bandwagon, getting off the bandwagon. Uh, but the crux of it remains is that you don't have loyalty of sticking around here, right? And that becomes an issue for any organization because you see a lot of these ECG related, these curves that happen in an organization when it comes to employees sticking around. So I think it's very important for leaders to go to the last mile, interact with every individual across the board, share that common sentiment, the larger objective, so that their transparency really exists and they feel really belong to the organization.
That's great. How do you know actually if your culture initiatives are, helping the business?
There are two ways to look at it. Either you have your KRS defined and then say, you know what, this is what I need to deliver. My boss needs me to ensure that I execute everything, and I've done that as tick in the box exercise. Or I take a step ahead and say, you know what, I don't want to add 10 KRAs to my job, right? I rather want to pick those 4 KRAs and say, you know what, I want to look at the value drivers, the outcome that they're going to achieve, right? Uh, I may devise a beautiful employee engagement, reward, and recognition program today. But what really happens in that process? Uh, it's a platform. I've called 10 people. I'm going to reward them and just walk away, right? Maybe celebrate post that. Uh, have I really wondered, has that made an impact in the organization? Have I really wondered, has that made any growth for the organization from where the needle was to where it has moved, right? Uh, that becomes the driver for any such initiative that you take, and it's importantly so because all these initiatives are an outcome of the culture, or rather not, in my view, the culture word is a term which has not been really uh, used right in today's day and age. I think we should just replace culture with character, and that's what my article talks about. If you notice, uh, at the moment you want to create that characteristic in the organization of outcome driven based goals, I think that's where you've achieved what you had to achieve. So if you to classic take an example, you wanted to drive an incentive mechanism, you want to drive a reward mechanism, uh, by giving that then sense of satisfaction in that process, because they have achieved a particular outcome, makes them feel really important in the entire ecosystem. Now, what happens in that process? I look at my happy employees catering to my customers, making them happy. So happy employees resulting into happy customers resulting into growth of the organization, profitability. So it's a cascading effect. If you see that profitability, if you see that happy customer coming back to you again, I think that's where you've achieved, your ROI on the culture initiatives that you've been taking.
That's great. So, how much success during these years, like you've got in managing the characters of the people?
Sorry, what do you say?
How much success you have
How much
received?
success? So, again, with my journey that you've noticed, I think it's the legacy that you leave behind, and that legacy, when it gets carried forward, that talks volumes about the success that you've noticed in the organization, right? Uh, in most part of my career, I think when we intend to set up organizations, or when we intend to make them grow from 10x to 100x, uh, the important aspect is, uh, are you structuring something which has an everlasting impact, or are you structuring something because it is a need of the hour today, right? So you need to be more future oriented. You need to have that foresight to understand, how will this process make an impact for me in the near future and result into growth of the organization. So I think those success stories, those organizations which have grown over the period of time, in my profile that you could notice, are the ones that we can talk volumes about, because they've seen that trajectory for themselves.
That's nice. I've seen your profile, Hanish, and I saw that you've worked into P&L management and business strategy. So, what makes a CHRO P&L ready? Can you share a time when HR helped the company saves the cost and grow the revenues?
So there was this interesting article, I was reading the other day, where most of these promoters, CEOs, founders, at a global level, right? They've moved away, and they've transitioned from talking to HR more from, what is my pipeline for hiring, right? What is my attrition percentage today, right? What has been my diversity percentage today? I think it's more about, how do you think, this talent investment can improve my revenue growth by X percentage, right? Am I looking at an individual as a revenue driver? So what is my revenue per employee, right? Am I going to calculate that? Then looking at what is my cost per employee, right? Will any cost reduction or cost cutting yield into reducing attrition, right? Because they're interrelated. How will that help me save an X dollar in the entire ecosystem? Those are the conversation one needs to have, and that's what makes you a P&L ready CHRO. Otherwise, most of these conversations become very transactional, right? And then you end up just doing these processes, which are very basic, rudimentary level job that you end up doing.
But how do you balance, doing what's best for the business and looking after the employees?
So, you know, it's a very close topic for a CHRO. How do you balance business outlook and what people are really looking at. Uh, there are multiple ways to look at it. And if I talk about our times that we've learned over a period of time, you know, starting from pre-COVID to COVID and now, right? Things have changed. Life has changed completely, right? uh, how we uh, how we had a free life, a very involved culture or character in the organization pre-COVID. Post-COVID, our only agenda was how do I ensure that I get my balance? Because the only thing that used to happen was switch on your laptop, start getting work, irrespective of taking a shower or not, doesn't matter. Your food is happening on the table, uh, and you end up just being in front of your system, right? Um, I think that's where individuals started learning how it's important to align to that one purpose that the organization has. That alignment gets you the right fitment of understanding, hey, you know what, is the organization really looking at me as a value add, an asset in the organization, or am I being considered as just one of those revenue drivers that's required? So, long and short is uh, you need to be as transparent, as open, as involved in decision making to these set of people. And rightly so, if you talk about, most of the times that you see in news articles today, X organization has laid off, n number of people, right? Uh, while I'm sure it's a very thoughtful process and they must have gone through deliberation and so on and so forth, it's not an easy task to run through that journey. But I think what becomes really critical is how you're doing that, right? Are you really involving these set of people and saying, you know what, let's sit together and understand, how you can help me reduce cost, right? Rather than I'm saying, you know what, you being redundant today because you can be replaced, or maybe my business is slowing down. Okay, there could be multiple such avenues that could open up when you start being transparent and vocal about the challenges that the organization is facing, and that involved or informed decision that gets been taken becomes a very worthwhile decision, because then the employee understands the situation of the organization. Otherwise, it's a one-sided monologue, and then we go on.
That's true, very true. So, have you seen any changes? Like, I'm stuck at your point of COVID. That still, like, there's a lot of conversation about that. People are coming to office, they're not
Mm,
coming to office, they're happy about it.
mm.
You know, what kind of challenges you faced? Is your, are your employees coming to the office, or what
Yes,
is the situation out
yes,
there?
yes, absolutely they are. Right. So if you talk about the transition that has happened, I think that's a classic example of change management, right? Uh, Pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID. How people have adapted to working in an environment which is uh, comfortable, and at the same time, not very comfortable in the place that you work. Um, yes, people have shown reluctance to come back to office. At the same time, people have shown really good excitement to dress up and get to work, right? Because that was one thing that people end up not doing for the longest time. So it has both, ups and downs that you talk about. But what has really made organizations think aloud in that process is how you need to be ready for any uncertain situations, right? You cannot be rigid in your approach. You need to show that flexibility, which helps you drive more productivity. What have we learned in this process through COVID and now? Travel time for any individual who commutes from office to home, home to office, uh, gets reduced. You start getting productive and effective in that particular time being. Now, there are many organizations who see it that way. There are many who don't see it that way, right? It's all about the kind of role that you're playing, right? Does your role really require you to be around? Absolutely, yes. Today, if you ask me, an HR person can sit at home and work. Absolutely can. Why not? But it becomes critical for an HR person to be in office and be around people, right? To understand, hey, you know what? Are you being available for any and everything that may be required, uh, not from the lows, but from the highs as well, right? So it's equal ownership, it's collective ownership, but at the same time, it needs to be more flexible in the way you operate.
That's nice. It's a good approach to think about. Like,
Yeah,
both should be balanced.
absolutely.
So, Hanish, I see that you have worked with a lot of, leaders in the
Mm,
industry and have a quite a bit experience into leadership development.
mm,
What are the biggest challenges, you're faced in acquiring top talents when we talk about talent acquisition. How do you
Mm.
address them?
So, I- I was just talking to one of these founders just last week, and this was a similar question that he had in mind because I end up advising a lot of these startups, early age startups.
Mhm.
Um, the typical question, how do I ensure one to get the right talent in the organization? How do I ensure that they continue showing that stickiness in the organization? I know it's a very simple three word uh, understanding for anybody to know. You know, any individual in the ecosystem that we are working today is, while salary becomes really critical and important for them to survive, but three broad and the most important aspects is uh, purpose, flexibility, and growth. Right? They are fundamentally the baseline of any decision making that a talent makes to move into an organization. What is the purpose that I am needed in the organization, right? Am I really required, or they're hiring because they're unaware or unsure of what kind of work is required to be done, right? Is my purpose aligned with the organization's purpose, right? Am I being equal contributor to the growth of the organization? So all that put together drives the purpose agenda for the individual and the organization. And once that marries, I think that's where you achieved 50% of your battle, right? Second is flexibility. And I keep telling this time and again to people. You need to understand what is it that you're looking forward to. Are you looking forward to outcome, or are you looking forward to processes and discipline and so on and so forth, right? I think in today's day and age, the way people are growing and evolving, and the big names that if we can think about without quoting them here, uh, they've all shown that flexibility to perform, right? You're not being rigid of how you're performing a task, but what are you doing and what can impact in the outcome is what is important for me today, right? Then looking at, are you being in office? Are you being in front of your system? Are you wearing the right clothes? Are you doing, XYZ job in an entire design or a fashion approach? I think all those have, gone are the days for those aspects that come into play. The last is growth. Why growth becomes important? Every individual, if you talk about you and I think we all look at that one particular aspect in life is, am I really growing, or have I become status quo in life? Okay. Has it plateaued in my career, or is it showing that growth trajectory that I need to see? Again, it not necessarily be monetary. It has to be something that is a value add to the organization, to the self in that process, right? So that's how these three factors become very, very critical in the entire ecosystem. Once you align these three to the individual and the organization, I think you won the battle. I think there's no other way that you can really attract an individual or talent in the organization.
And what if, like, you've hired someone and that person is not aligned?
Absolutely, yes. I think that's where you've understood that the entire process of aligning the individual has faltered. Uh, it is not necessary, right? That out of 10 people that you hire or you onboard them, all 10 of them are going to be rock stars and aligned to the organization's objective, right? You may end up having a couple of them who may not be fully aligned. But does that really mean that it's a miscalculation in that approach? Not really, right? Uh, Human behavior is such, and I may drifting a little bit away from human resources to psychology, but human behavior is such. You adapt to situations. You may not adapt to situations, right? It's a very situation based outcome. So you end up having a couple of them who may not be fully aligned. But the important aspect is, what is the degree of misalignment? If it is significant, yes, I think a clear communication conversation can help address that. But if there is a marginal difference of error, I think it is bound to happen because you may not get someone who's it's a simple statement that one makes every time. One shoe size does not fit all. So you need to understand that it could not be 100% fit. There could be a marginal space of improvement or alignment that may be required. Improvement is the wrong word, but alignment that's required.
All the new HR tech tools,
Yeah.
how do you mix technology with human judgment, when hiring talent?
I think now you're addressing the elephant in the room, AI. I think it's a common topic. It's become. I think people are now sleeping, eating, talking AI, right? And if you notice, AI is something which is not a technology which is out in the market today. It's been there for long, right? It's just that it has evolved over a period of time, right? We have started understanding the importance that the efficiency that can bring to the entire ecosystem. Now, if you can read the words that I'm trying to say, it's the efficiency which becomes important, right? It is a value driver for you to take decisions, but the decision is a human decision, right? It is us as humans who drive those outcomes into decisions or whatsoever. Okay. It is important that we use AI to the fullest potential because it's technology, right? It's at our disposal and it's available to us. And why not so we use it? Because it's helping you save time. It's helping you take decisions more accurately. It gives you the insight at a very short span in time. But what is important is the empathy, the judgment, the understanding, the behavior, the style. Everything has to be dependent on human intervention, right? Uh, all the inputs can come from AI, but the output need to be decided by human. And frankly, so I was talking about this to a bunch of students the other day. A very typical question for these students because they're still aspiring to become something in life. What happens to our future because AI is taking over everything? Will jobs be redundant in nature? Right? Uh, and it's a very simple understanding. And I gave them this one simple statement. You need to understand who's built AI. AI is built by a human, right? So humans can replace AI very soon in any manner, shape, size. But it is not necessarily that AI will replace all human beings on this planet. It's not possible because they also need to be developed. They also need to be refined in the nature of work that they are. So our intervention is equally important as their intervention is in life.
That's true. But what do you think that how much acceptance is there for AI? I mean, some people are skeptical about it. Uh, how it is going to work? Are they replacing us? And some people are very pro to it. That okay, we should implement this. We should implement like maybe 10 softwares to do the job. What is your thought process around it?
So I'm going to use an analogy for that, right? Uh, hypothetically, let's take an example. If in case you studied MBA, right?
Hmm.
Uh, you've done that education back in days because it is a need of the hour. My parents said do MBA, so I did MBA. My friends pressurized doing MBA, so I did MBA. I saw the world moving in that direction of MBA, so I did MBA, right? Or I did engineering or medical or whatsoever, right? Uh, there are most decisions which rest because of peer pressure. There are most decisions which rest because I am passionate about it. Okay. Uh, AI is exactly the same, right? You can drive it as a passion, or you can drive it as peer pressure. Okay. Uh, but the end objective is to understand: is it adding value in the kind of work that you're doing in the ecosystem, right? Uh, After doing my MBA or after doing my medicals or engineering, do I stop my life there and start working on whatever limited knowledge that I've acquired? It doesn't work that way, right? You need to upgrade yourself on a daily basis, right? You need to understand how a new particular concept or a process can add more value to me. Typically, think about it. People after doing their post graduation, and I see abundance of them, and that's why our businesses are growing in the education sector. They end up doing these short courses of a year, executive MBAs, Harvard's and Kellogg's of the world, the Ivy League colleges, and so on and so forth, right? And rightly so. Why? Because they're actually making you ready for future, right? And if you don't upgrade yourself, you've been left behind. You miss the bus. Okay? So for me, I need to ensure that I am equally ready for the future tomorrow, or I'll be redundant. I can't be relevant in this space. So I need to be relevant in the entire space that I am working with. And relevance comes with a new technology that's called AI today.
So it's kind of a need of an hour.
And if you ask me, you need to stay relevant. Need of the hour comes because you're being relevant in the space. Otherwise, you become redundant, and then that's how you miss the bus.
That's nice. So, Hanish, what about the engagement of employees? And we touched this topic a few minutes back when we were talking about the talent. What keeps employees motivated and engaged in a fast-changing work environment?
What keeps employees motivated and engaged, like I mentioned in a few of the other conversations that we've had, uh, it's important of getting the sense of purpose, right? Uh, an employee, what does he? And a very classic question: do you really want to get up and come to office today? You know, is there a reason for me to come to office? I don't know, right? Uh, am I excited to come to office? I may be. Maybe I'm going to interact with a few bunch of friends that I have. Maybe send some, exchange some thoughts and ideas. Maybe have some casual time and so on and so forth. But do I really want to come to office to drive something out of passion? I think that's what becomes more important and engaging, right? Uh, and when does that happen? If my passion aspirations are aligned with the organization and vice versa, so right? If I'm able to align that together, I think that calls a sense of engagement and purpose in the organization. And believe you and me, if that's been there, you don't need to drive these festivities or these engagement, tambolas and so on and so forth that people end up with. Frankly, if you ask me, I think those are how do I put it across? Those are those little uh, uh, you know uh, uh, aspects which will just help you change the environment for a few hours or minutes, right? Am I looking at those short-term changes? No. I want to look at those everlasting impact that I spoke about a while back. I want to look at how this individual is really passionate in driving uh, the organization's philosophy and concept and the objective that they have. So I need to ensure that the engagement with him is at a level where he believes that this is his passion to drive, right? And that's where your ownership comes into play. And that's the culture, that's the engagement that you need to build with for the organization.
So, any of the initiatives you would like to tell us? Any programs you created or like implemented or executed in your organization for employees to retain them, or maybe yeah.
Absolutely. I think like I mentioned, there are two ways to look at it. One, what is the aspiration that individuals have in the organization? Is there aspiration to be abreast with the changing technologies, the changing skill sets that are required in the organization? So, am I ready to give them to reskill and upskill at every given point in time? Now, how does that benefit both? It helps employees to stay relevant in the space that they are. It helps them to understand that the organization cares about them and believes in them than making them redundant. uh, on the other hand, if you look at it from the organization perspective, it helps you create a talent marketplace, right? It's a concept that one needs to start adapting to. Uh, Once you have created the talent marketplace, you really need not go out in the market to hire talent. The only reason why you end up in a space, I mean, not only reason, but two reasons, why you end up in a space of laying off or right sizing, I would rather say, not laying off, uh, is the hunger to hire people or to get people because I believe that I may not have that skill or talent in the organization. But have you really sat back and thought, hey, why don't I sit with every individual and understand what is that additional skill that person can add to? That could be the passion that one needs to work with. Today I may be an HR, right? But my passion really lies in technology. Right? Has the organization sat with me and said, while I know you've been adding a significant amount of value to the organization from people perspective, but what do you think you can do, apart from that, in terms of maybe other skills that you possess, right? Being an engineer, MBA, acquiring software skills and so on and so forth. I think I've left behind my passion and I've acquired what my market wanted me to do, right? What the world wanted me to do, right? If I start building those passion projects into the work is something which I can help the organization and the individual do what is required to be done for a larger objective that they're playing. These are the engagement activities that one has actually taken over a period of time in multiple organizations and has yielded significant amount of change. I can probably quote numbers. There's one organization, again, without quoting names, uh, where the attrition percentage has actually moved from a 35% to a 12 to 15%, right? That's a paradigm shift that you probably see once you start building the sense of purpose in an organization.
That's true. That's very true. And what do you think that? your interest in technology is helping you to drive the initiatives towards AI, or like maybe like that's just again that is required.
So I'll put an analogy. Being an HR, I think I love doing that. Trying to relate things with the real life. Uh, when you tend to catch up with age, yeah. Uh, I hope everybody remains healthy and happy all throughout. But your body uh, m- starts moving into a direction where you can't hold your weight for long, right? And that with age, I think that's how our entire system has been built. You need support, right? You need a stick, walking stick, right? Uh, that is what technology is, right? It is enabling you to walk or perform better. That's it, nothing else. It is not taking away your legs. Your legs are still intact, right? It will still remain there. It'll perform its own job. It may just help you perform it better, right? Maybe another example. Why do you wear football shoes or cricket shoes, or why do you gear up in a cricket kit and so on and so forth? It's enabling you to perform better, right? It is not saying, what, I'm going to replace you, make a stick stand or maybe a machine stand and make him wear the gear and start playing. Doesn't work, right? These are enablers. These enablers will only help you perform better, right? So that's how you need to address them with.
That's nice. Um, let's talk about the trends. Like, we have been evaluating a lot of trends when we write articles. What HR trends do you see in next 5 years?
I probably see three broad areas, right? And critically so, because that's how every organization needs to now shift towards. I think the first is you need to start hiring for skills over roles. You can't hire for roles. I mean, this has become a very redundant concept. I have a role in the organization. I'm going to hire a person. Rather, I hire a person who has a skill to perform multiple roles. Right? It helps me uh, increase efficiency, build cost effectiveness in the organization. In internal parlance, if I have to talk about an organization, you need to have a talent marketplace. That talent marketplace can address everything from effectiveness to cost to productivity, anything and everything that you can talk about, engagement as well. Uh, the second is AI and HR, right? It's very important again because, like I said, they're enablers for you to take more informed and faster decision, leaving empathy and strategy outside because that's a value driver for a human to do, right? Uh, it's going to throw it on you. It's not going to implement it for you, right? The third most important, and that plays, I think, that tops the chart for everything, if you ask me, is well-being as productivity. Right? Don't look at well-being as a perk in any organization. I've got you health insurance, I've got you health benefits. I've been trying to do some sessions and so on and so forth. That's not really a perk for any organization. That should be considered as a productivity driver, if you ask me, which can help you make happy employees, like I said, happy customers, and higher profitability. So these are three broad areas which every HR should look at.
And any of the advices you would like to give to the startups, like because of course the situation varies when we are working in the larger organizations and when we are working for startups. What are the things like and the trends you feel advisable for them?
Uh, I think it's very critical for every HR person to think like a business leader, right? First, and then think like an HR leader, right? Uh, and rightly so, because the moment you start thinking like a business leader is when you start talking how people's strategy can impact in business decision making, right? That becomes very important for the entire ecosystem. What also becomes important is to understand, what are those aspects which can drive innovation, growth, maybe resilience, maybe trust factor in the organization for one to evolve around. Uh, Basic fundamental rules. You don't need to really, you know, spend umpty amount of money into that. But these are basic principles that you need to inculcate. There's a time, if I can just narrate one more example. Someone asked me, how would you want to devise the entire value system for an organization? Do you want to devise the mission and vision statement first or the value system? So I think it's very important, to understand uh, the organization is built around the DNA that you want to build it around, right? What drives the DNA for the organization is the value system, right? It's a storyline that you're trying to build. For me to build that DNA for the organization, I need to have the right values which can help me build the DNA for the organization. For the right mission and vision statement that I need to define for the organization, I need to ensure my value system is far more effective to ensure my vision and mission statement is achievable in the terms that I have already defined. So I think you need to understand at every step how each of them are interrelated and correlated, right? And that's what becomes sense of innovation and growth, if you ask me. The last factor, uh, which I think is a takeaway for all of us, not just HR leaders, but every individual across the industry that we're working. I think to really understand that in any organization, trust is the real currency that you need to play with, right? Uh, if in case that is missing, I think the entire foundation is baseless for that matter. You need to trust your employees. You need to trust your leaders. You need to trust your peers in that process to ensure that you build a world class environment.
Mhm. And what is your advice for the Gen Zs? Because we are going towards the end of our interview, and wonderful thoughts. Like I've heard about like a lot of things. What is your one advice for the Gen Zs as an employee or as an HR?
See, I would rather not say it's an advice. I think it's a need. It's a need to stay abreast with the evolving or the dynamic environment that we work in, right? Uh, the space that we are into, not just the industry or the profile that we play, but I think as humans, we need to ensure that we stay relevant at any given point in time. Uh, and that's what I even say, even to young kids who are aspiring to grow up in their career. It's, you know, mere education is not going to add any value, right? You need to ensure you complement that with something, right? You need to ensure that you pick up those skills which are necessary in the space that we are, or in the times to come, right? Uh, be 10 steps ahead of thinking process. Like if I had thought about AI 5 years ago, I think creating many such platforms like ChatGPT, Copilot, and so ever uh, would have become a very easy task for any individual across the board. But today we are dependent on them, right? So what comes out of that is that if I was relevant back in days, I think I would have been up the curve. So for any individual who's trying to aspire, is important factors to stay relevant in the space that you are.
That's nice. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I mean, like, we're happy to have you here again.
Thank you so very much. I think it was completely thrilling to be part of it, and you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I hope you guys have all the success.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anish.